Before we start, I wanted to do this last week actually, but I wanted to bring up some news from a convention that was held recently called Dragonsteel Nexus. This was a convention that Brandon Sanderson runs, another fantasy author, and Robin Hobb had a panel there where she was answering some questions. And apparently, she confirmed at Dragonsteel Nexus that she had signed a contract for a new Realm of the Elderlings book, just recently. The rumor is also that she has been writing two of them, but she only has contract for one of them. And she often writes things and then doesn't finish it like 3/4 of the way through or 7/8 of the way through and moves on to a new project. So fingers crossed we get two books, but at least we got one book for Realm of the Elderlings coming out.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it takes place. Is it going to be the Rainwilds? Did she say anything?
I don't think she said anything about that, but there are two books or two different stories in Realm of the Elderlings that the fandom has heard about for the past, 7-8 years.
Right.
One was a story about Bee.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know if Bee is the main character or it's a story with Bee, I guess.
Right.
We don't know if she just features or whatever. And there was another one about Patience and Lacey.
Right.
So we don't know if either of those are this new story or if it's going to be one or the other. But those are the ideas that people have heard from Robin Hobb over the years, but we haven't heard updates on the content of it. And this is the first time that we've gotten a new book confirmed.
Right. So exciting news.
Very exciting news. So we'll have more years to add on at the end of this podcast.
I think she personally is doing this to us.
Yes, I think so.
She's heard our podcast and goes, 10 years isn't long enough.
Oh, yeah. So great news. Very exciting. And I also want to give a quick notice that we will be taking off a couple weeks for the holiday. So this is the last episode of this year that we will be having, and then we'll be taking 2 weeks off, and we will see you in the New Year's after that. Just for the holidays, a little bit of relaxation on our end as well.
Yeah.
I believe, let me look up a calendar real quick. Very professional of me as a podcaster. So this is going to come out on the 20th. We are going to skip the 27th and the 3rd, and then be back to you on January 10th. That is when the next one will come out. And it will be chapter 23, because this one is chapter 22.
Yeah.
Welcome back to another episode of Is Fitz Happy? I'm Luke.
And I'm Emma.
And this week, as I just mentioned 10 seconds ago, we're discussing chapter 22, Family Reunion. And this, as we're getting into it, I will give a small content warning. This is not the chapter that we were discussing,
Right.
but we will be discussing sexual assault in this chapter.
Right.
It is contemplated on Kennit's part.
Right. It is discussed. So
Yes.
if you don't want to listen to that, we will
Probably
see you
about halfway through, I would guess. But yeah.
It's pretty close to the end.
You think so? I thought it was about 10.
Yeah, you're right. I thought it was the end. Never mind.
Yeah. But maybe about halfway through. So it's when we get to Kennit's point of view, I believe, the first time.
Maybe, yeah.
So just so you know, that's coming up. We'll discuss it. It doesn't happen.
Right.
All right. Without further ado, though, we will get back into the chapter and start it with Wintrow's point of view.
And Wintrow is confused and frustrated.
Yeah, this is the aftermath of the confrontation with Paragon, and he sees Paragon burning. He's like, what went wrong? What did they do to provoke Kennit?
Yeah, so already in the mindset that he's pretty trusting of Kennit and Kennit's judgment.
Yeah, he saw what was happening, so he thinks in his head, why had Paragon so foolishly challenged both the serpents and the Vivacia? How had the fire broken out, and why had Kennit abandoned such a valuable prize? Had he taken any prisoners? The emptiness of not knowing threatened to devour him. So he's not 100% on Kennet's side. He just wants to know what happened. And he's wondering why the Paragon would provoke further things, but also why Kennit wouldn't, stamp out the fire.
Yeah, why he wouldn't take such a valuable prize, because obviously having a live ship is important to him. So why wouldn't he want two? So lots of questions, not very many answers. And Edda's kind of rebuking him for having any questions to begin with, because as she says, there's no point in wondering. Kennit will tell us what he wants us to know whenever we see him again.
Yeah. But of course, we're in Wintrow's point of view at the later half of Ship of Destiny, so he has to look at Edda, and he is dumb with desire and with the necessity of never acknowledging that desire, which is an important line to read out before Edda rebukes him, because that comes into play in his point of view and in every action that he takes, really, is that he's kind of in love with Edda. He's crushing hard.
Yeah. Yeah, he really likes her. Before we go forward more than that, I wanted to back up just a little bit, because Wintrow does mention, so it's raining at this point of the story. He mentions that he's glad for the rain because he can't find any tears of his own, which I found a little bit interesting, that he saw this whole thing happen and potentially the death of his family and their hopes at living, and he isn't sad enough to cry, which, I mean, it could just be shock. It could be the not knowing that gets him, I don't know, to not cry. There's no right or wrong way to feel, but I thought it was very interesting that he said he couldn't find the tears to cry specifically. And then as Edda's inviting him inside, it says, if there was any comfort left for him at this miserable point in his life, it was Edda. And I thought that was really interesting because he just got done talking about how he can't even muster up tears for what happened, but
he's just so torn. I think that's what it is. He's just very torn between his family and what he believes in is what he's doing right now.
So yes, so he is hanging out with Edda and he is wanting her bad. He's down bad.
Yeah, so Edda says, long ago you told me he was a chosen of Sa, meaning Kennit. Do you no longer believe that? And Wintrow replies, I don't know what I believe anymore. I've seen the good he has done everywhere. He is a powerful force for freedom and the bettering of people's lives. He could build himself a majestic house full of riches and servants, and folk would still lionize him. But he continues to sail, to do battle with the slavers, and to free the imprisoned. Given all that, how can I doubt the greatness of his soul? But you do, don't you? Yes, I do. Sometimes at night, when I try to meditate, when I try to find my place in this world, I cannot make it all fit together. There is something missing in Kennit. I feel it, but I cannot name it. A shadow of anger crossed her face. Perhaps what is missing is not from him, but from you. Perhaps you lose faith whenever Sa's path for you carries you where you do not wish to go. Her words numbed him. He had never expected to hear such rebuke from her, let alone to have it ring so true. She speaks on, saying that, he has his faults, but he's doing amazing things.
Look at what he achieves in spite of all his own doubts and pains. I feel like this chapter reads a little weird to me. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just being cynical because I love Edda and I wish she wasn't so pro Kennit. But I find it so strange that, number one, Wintrow has any doubts anymore at all. I mean, he kind of always is a little wishy-washy, but it's odd to me that he has doubts about Kennit still and yet chooses to ignore them to follow him anyway. And then it's kind of odd to me that Edda is so fiercely in Kennit's corner. I mean, I get it because obviously in her point of view, he loves her. He's given her a new life. He has chosen her of all people to be his partner. And I get why she would, but it feels odd that he's not around, he's not there, and she's talking to somebody who she does care deeply about in a friendship way. And instead of just saying, or being like, yeah, you can have your own opinion, she's like getting angry that Wintrow doesn't feel the exact same way she does.
Because everything that they have is due to Kennit, both of them.
Mm.
So I think Etta is also, I mean, was taught by Wintrow and
Yeah.
is literally doing what Wintrow does to other people.
Right.
So I think that's kind of why. But she came from a world, she kind of speaks on this. She says, do you think that a man must first become perfect before he can do good? And then Wintrow's like, Saw's hand can fit around any tool. But why must he take my ship from me? Not just take her, but change her to a creature I don't even recognize. Why must he kill those who came only to take us home? I don't understand that, Etta, and I never shall. So she's trying to ask him questions to examine why he's actually feeling that way
Right.
and getting down to it. And eventually he gets there. But also, she's kind of spouting off on the own I don't know how to put this, on the doctrine about Saw that Wintrow would have told her. Like, oh yeah, no man can be perfect. Everyone can be a creature of Saw or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think Etta has really grasped onto that because she grew up in a world that no one was perfect. Everyone was awful. Everyone did horrible things to survive.
Right.
And still do. And it's very tough out there. And she was taken out of that world by someone who, yes, she knows is not perfect and yes, has done terrible things to survive, but values her and loves her and wants to have a kid with her, all in her mind again.
Right. From her point of view, yes.
And Kennit, despite him saying he doesn't, kind of does.
Yeah, he
in
does.
his own way.
Yeah.
But anyways, so she is completely understanding of that sentiment, whereas Wintrow can state it but doesn't understand, kind of like the slavery bad thing, and then he finally understood that slavery actually is awful.
Yeah.
I think it's that kind of sentiment where she's like, no, I don't care how Kennit, could potentially be bad or is wronging you. You need to straighten up your attitude towards him because he's amazing.
Right.
Like, he's done so many good things. You don't need to nitpick all the small little things. Why are you feeling this way? Why bring up these concerns now? And eventually, Wintrow does get around to it and says that, like, why does he have to turn my ship into a creature I don't recognize? Why does he have to kill all these people? And Edda's like, perhaps you have already determined that you will not understand it. I read in a book you gave me that our words shape our reality. Look at what your words have just done to what is. You have reshaped it to make it a grievance against yourself. Your ship, you say. Is she? Was she ever anyone's ship? Or was she a living creature imprisoned in an unfamiliar body and then claimed as a possession? Has Kennit changed her, or has he simply freed her to become who she truly was? How do you know he has killed those who came to free you, if that indeed was what they intended? And yet, we know nothing. Yet you have already decided it is a wrong done to you, so that you can nurture your anger and feel justified. That's no better than wallowing in self-pity. And he looks at her in amazement, like, wow, what a transformation. I knew you were wicked smart. But the book's just revealed even more so.
Yeah. It's, I don't know. I think in a way she is right. He does kind of make everything about himself and
he's still a kid.
Yeah, he's 15, so of course he does. But he is making the situation about himself and about the wrongs done to him instead of looking at the bigger picture. So in some ways she's correct. I don't know. It's hard because I can't let go of the fact that we know Kennit is such a trash person, and it's right there. And Wintrow's I don't know, something about him's just off. And everybody's like, no, it's fine. And he's like, all right, I guess it's fine. And so I think I can't get over how close he is to being
he does
correct.
say something is missing from Kennit, and I don't know what.
Yeah. I don't know. But
which is an interesting turn of phrase.
Yes. But yeah, so I don't know. I can't articulate what my problem is with this scene very well, I think, because on one level, it's kind of like how Wintrow's feeling, I guess. On one level, I like rationally can understand where all these characters are coming from, but then on my own personal level, I don't like it. So
You're like, I want him to get there. I want him to understand. Probably because you're anticipating what's coming up next.
Yeah.
And you're like, Wintrow, snap out of it now so you can be there for Althea.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know. But anyway, it is really interesting to see how Etta has grown, because before she would just attack Wintrow physically, and now she's using her words.
Yeah, he says he had recognized her intelligence and respected her cunning and her courage from the first day he had met her. Now there was schooling behind the intellect and an ethic behind the courage. It amplified her beauty.
But yes, Etta is now in a foul mood, and she has said, you know, I wanted to tell you a secret, but now I don't know if I care to, because you're being so childish and hurting my feelings.
And Wintrow thinks for a while and then turns up his palm in surrender. And it's like, okay, fine, I'll let it go. She grabs his hand and then says,
I'm pregnant. I carried Kennit's child. And that puts him right back into his bad mood over Kennit.
yeah, 15-year-old, his crush saying like, yep.
Yeah.
Those words shut the door between them, closing him off from her life and her light. She was Kennit's. She had always been Kennit's, and she would always be Kennit's. Wintrow himself would always be alone.
Oh, dramatic.
I wasn't sure at first, yet ever since a certain night, I have had a feeling it was so. And today, when he sent me away, as he had never done before, I thought perhaps there might be a reason. So I sat here and tested myself with a needle on a thread held over my palm. It swung so violently there can be no doubt. All indications are that I carry a son, a man to follow after him. She took her hand from his and proudly set it on her flat belly. You must be very happy. He forced the words past his choking pain.
I think it's really cool to see how pregnancy is determined in this world.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really curious. I didn't do any research because
I looked it up.
Oh, yeah.
The needle over the palm thing is an old wives' tale kind of thing that has been around for a while. I don't know exactly when, but apparently, I don't know if it's just to determine pregnancy, but from what I saw, it's to determine what gender or sex the baby is going to be. I think it like goes back and forth for boy or like around for a boy and back and forth for a girl or something like that. And if it stays still, you're not going to have any more children after that. Like it can tell you how many you're going to have and what genders they are or something.
Fun.
Yeah. So.
What an interesting little tidbit to put in there. I don't know. I just find stuff like that really interesting, especially when there's not the modern pregnancy test.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to think about how people in this world, but in general in the past, would have dealt with like the what if.
Yeah. I mean, ancient Egyptian people had pregnancy tests.
Yeah. They
peed on a certain kind of grain, I think. And if it sprouted, you were pregnant or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Also, I think somewhere in Europe, they would pee on a frog.
Yeah.
But I don't know. They've been figuring it out for a really long time.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I don't know how they figured it out, but they've been figuring it out.
It was not one of my ancestors. I don't. I have no inkling. I mean, I guess it could have been, but whatever. It's really interesting to me. That's the only point I was going to make. But poor Wintrow, he's butthurt about this because the love of his life is officially somebody else's, even though she's been very clearly not into him the whole time. But now it's real because she's pregnant. And
he just, even keeled, kind of choking past his mouth, saying, "Oh, you must be very happy."
And she's a little hurt by this. She's like, "That's all you have to say?"
He's like, "Oh, it was all he dared to say."
Yes.
Every other thought was better left unuttered. He bit his tongue and looked at her in helpless silence.
And then she lets him know why she's upset. I had hoped for more. Foolish, I suppose. But Kennit has so often called you his prophet that now don't laugh. I had fancied that when I told you I carried the king of the pirate's son, you would, oh, I don't know, say some words that foretold his greatness, or that a faint flush rose to her cheek. Like in the old tales, Wintrow managed to say, a soothsaying of wonders to come. She turned aside from him, suddenly embarrassed to have dreamed such large dreams for her child. Wintrow made a valiant effort to set aside the hurt boy in himself and speak as both a man and a priest to her. I have no prophecy for you, Etta, no saw sent foretelling, no inspired prognostication. I believe that if the child is pledged to greatness, his heritage will come just as much from you as from his father. I see this in you right now, that regardless of what other folk do or do not see in your child, he will always reign in your heart. You will see the value of him long before others do, and know that the greatest trait he will carry is simply that he is himself. A child takes root in his parents' acceptance. Your baby already has that gift from you. She glowed. I cannot wait to see Kennit's face when I tell him. So he does kind of give her a prophecy in a way.
Yeah. I mean, it's more, he does a great job. He's, as we've been talking about other characters and how they've been maturing and everything, Wintrow, as always, has been very in touch with his own emotional intelligence and being able to set aside the hurt boy in himself to speak as a man and a priest is very good of him here.
Yeah.
Because that would hurt a lot as a young boy who is your heart set on somebody and they're like, I'm never going to be with you.
Right. And as much as we're teasing him a little bit for being so dramatic, it is a big deal that he likes somebody and this is kind
of the first crush ever.
And this is sort of the reality in his face of it's not going to happen. And that is really hard to deal with. And props to him for not taking it out on Etta or on this news that Etta has given him.
Yeah. And being able to deliver not a prophecy, but well wishes.
Yeah.
In such a nice way and saying like, oh, this baby has your love. And that means the world to the baby. So the baby's going to do great things.
Right.
Basically.
Yeah. But that's a really important thing to have. And you're already giving it. Yeah. And I think that's really big of him.
Also, not just saying, or not saying that, oh, it's Kennit's son, he's going to be great. It's not just Kennit's son, it's yours as well. And that's why he's going to be great.
Yeah. I think that's really sweet. And I think it does go back to, I think the last time they talked where she was talking about being Kennit's and wanting to have his baby. And he sort of had that saying of, you shouldn't put yourself in the box of what you are to Kennit. Like, you should also be proud of who you are on your own. Yeah. And I think in this moment, it's touching back on that of like, yeah, okay, it's Kennit's kid, but your child too. And you should be proud of what you're putting into this child. The greatness will also come from you, not just Kennit. So reaffirming her there. And it works, it does make her feel better because she is feeling embarrassed about wanting greatness for her child, wanting the special prophecy. But while it's not a prophecy, it is well wishes and a nice thing to say about your future child from somebody that she cares about.
So Etta can't wait to tell Kennit about this and says that to Wintrow. And Wintrow takes a deep breath, and sureness filled him, and if Saw inspired him to speak, he knew it was then. I counsel you to keep these tidings secret for a time yet. His mind is so full of concerns just now. Wait for a time when he truly needs to hear it. Perhaps you are right in this, she said regretfully. Wintrow doubted she would heed him. But this is very, very good suggestion. As we'll see in Kennit's point of view upcoming when he ends, I think, the chapter with the thought of, oh, I need to find a reason to leave Etta on shore.
Yeah.
So if he knew, Etta wouldn't come along to the final battle.
Yes, she would be left home.
Yeah. So this is a very, very good suggestion. And yeah, Saw's filling him and speaking for him in this moment.
Do you think that it is like a greater being talking through him? Or do you think it's partially just his own sort of jealousy that happens to be good advice?
I think that one more so. Yeah, but now we switch over to Paragon, who is burning.
Yes, he is burning, and
The squall, the storm has come, so it is
yes,
raining as well.
he's trying really hard to ignore the people below deck.
Mm-hmm.
He's just sort of, I don't know.
He's says he's sinking inside himself to a place deeper than any ocean floor. So he's trying to ignore everything around him. He's like meditating, but inside him, Amber wept, and that was hard to bear.
Yeah.
It's hard to ignore everything, but he's doing his best, and he's not really acknowledging anything, any outside stimulus.
Right. And he's just hoping it'll all stop quickly. He is surprised at how much Amber being upset is hurting him. Like, he didn't realize how connected he was with her, but now he realizes that he is connected and it does hurt him that she's upset. But there's nothing he can do about it. This has to happen. He has to die.
The carpenter had crawled as far forward in his bow as she could get under the deck. Despite the pain of her scalds, she had dragged herself through the cold water flooding his holds. He wished she had succumbed to the numbing water. It would be a kinder end. But she lived and clung to the main stem and spoke faintly. He held himself back from her. So he's not even listening to what she's saying at the moment.
Right.
But a serpent is butting against him. Hey, stupid. Are you just going to let them do this to you? Wake up. You've as much right to live as she does. I've as much a right to die also, Paragon retorted. Then he wished he had not roused himself to speak, for now he was aware of Amber's agonized words as well. And she's saying, Paragon, I don't want to die. Not with all my work unfinished. Please, please don't do this. No one has the right to die uselessly, the serpent proclaimed. Paragon recognized his voice now. He was the one who had shouted mockingly at the other serpents as they attacked him. So Paragon is blind, but we know this as Carrion, the white serpent.
Yes.
Because that white serpent is the only one who stayed behind, and Kennit was upset that Carrion wasn't eating the Althea and Jack in the water.
Yes. So Carrion is oddly aware of sort of what's happening.
Yeah.
And is sort of meddling.
Yeah.
Which I find very interesting. I mean, it does go with his character. He's very, I don't know, contrarian. But I also find it interesting that he says no one has the right to die uselessly.
Yeah, when he's so nihilistic himself and just like, nothing's useless, you should have just let me be dumb.
Yeah, and he keeps trying to provoke others to kill him.
Yeah.
So in a way, he kind of is a kindred spirit to Paragon.
Yeah. Paragon reminds himself dying is the most useful thing I can do for Kennit and tries to compose himself. The serpent's like, I do not speak of Kennit, I speak of being useful to your own kind. Bolt brags that she alone can lead us home and protect us. I don't believe her. The memories I have recall many guides and protectors. Surely what one can do well, two can do better. Why is she so eager to kill you to please this Kennit? Why do you either of you care about him at all? She wishes me to be dead, to please Kennit? The words came slowly to Paragon. He could not attach sense to them. Surely this was Kennit's sorrowful will for him. It had nothing to do with Vivacia, or Bolt as she now styled herself. Unless she wanted Kennit for herself. Unless she wished to do away with Paragon so she would have no rivals. Perhaps Kennit had deceived him. Perhaps Kennit wished him dead so he could be with Vivacia. The traitor thought shocked him. Go away. This is my decision. Right there, we see a little bit of Paragon's paranoia coming back and, again, paralleling Kennit's character, his paranoia. And this paranoia is actually kind of correct. This is a paranoid thought.
I was going to say, we see his paranoia coming back. However, it's not necessarily paranoia. It is...
Well, not all paranoia is the incorrect assumption that something's going to happen.
That's true. But yeah, he is struggling with the reality that this might not have been as sad as Kennit made it seem.
Or Kennit's spontaneous idea on deck to help Paragon.
Right. That it was always his plan.
Yeah.
And he can't think like that because that doesn't coincide with how he feels about Kennit and who Kennit is in his mind. So he's sort of trying to get this serpent to leave him alone.
Yeah. And just says, this is my decision. But Carrion asks, okay, who are you to make that decision.
Right. And he calls himself Paragon of the Ludlucks.
Yep.
Except that's not a good enough answer for Carrion, because Carrion asks, and who else are you?
Inside him, he felt the sudden press of Amber's bare hands against him. No, he screamed at both of them. No, I am Paragon of the Ludlucks, only that. But within him, from darkness deeper than any human soul, other voices spoke, and Amber listened to them. So she puts her bare hands to the wizard wood and is trying to make any sort of connection she can to Paragon to have her plea heard. Basically, like, I am trying to do a lot of great things. I have a lot of plans, and I cannot die like this here in the middle of the ocean with none of them done.
Yeah.
Please. So we leave that conversation and jump over to Althea, who is waking up inside Vivacia.
Right. And before we do that jump, I just want to reiterate that Amber is pressing her bare hands against the wizard wood. And we know that Amber has silvered hands because Amber is beloved and therefore is able to connect with Paragon in a way that others wouldn't.
Probably stirs the dragon selves a little bit more as well.
Right.
With the serpent there kind of trying to make him recall the other parts of him, plus the silvered hands.
Yeah, it's a lot.
A lot of stimulus.
Yes.
A lot of jolts to memory. But before we get to that conversation, as I mentioned, we do jump over to Althea. She is waking up in a room, inside her old room.
Yes.
And she's kind of looking around. It's like, oh, someone took care of me. And there's so many nice things around. I'm in a room of someone who is obviously cultured. There's books and some clothes and everything like that. But it doesn't feel like Vivacia because it's dead wood surrounding me.
Yeah. So interestingly, first of all, she talks about how the stateroom feels right but subtly wrong as well, because it isn't all of her things, but it is well kept. And then with the dead wood as well, I'm sure that adds to that feeling.
Right. Yeah. She sat up too suddenly. A violent fit of coughing shook her. A stray memory surfaced as from a dream, sprawling on Vivacia's deck, very cold, coughing up seawater. So now she kind of thinks back to what had happened and is piecing together that Jack must have saved her because her skirts were dragging her down and she wasn't able to swim herself. So they got saved, obviously, and she's trying to piece together what had happened, basically.
Now she's dressed in a man's nightshirt.
Of very fine linen, and warm woolen blankets covered her legs. Someone had cared for her with kindness. She seized on that as a sign. The truce negotiations had gone well. Brashen was probably on board right now, talking with Captain Kennit. That would explain why she had not been returned to the Paragon. She'd dress and go to find them right after she went forward to see the figurehead. She had been parted from her ship for far too long.
So interestingly, in Althea's point of view, she can't even imagine that something bad has happened. Like in her mind,
because she's treated well, she's in her old room.
Yeah. Clearly, this is something has gone right. Everything's fine. Everything's gone well. She is about to be part of the negotiations to get her ship back. Somehow it worked. It's fine.
Because why would Kennit save her if something went wrong?
Yeah. True.
That's kind of the big point, right?
Yeah.
And Kennit shouldn't have saved her, but she looked like Wintrow.
Exactly. And on top of that, it's really interesting to see that she's, I don't know, it kind of feels like almost in shock she did have a near-death experience and she doesn't know what's going on, but she's just very like, oh yeah, the ship feels dead, but it's okay. I'm just going to go talk to her and obviously that'll fix it. Maybe I've just been away too long. It's fine.
Yeah, and each little detail is kind of raising her estimation of Kennit in this scene as well. So she's looking around, and as we mentioned, she is in Wintrow's room. She doesn't know it's Wintrow's room, but she's looking around and sees a shelf of books, well-kept clothes, and her respect for Kennit increased. The quality of a crew said a great deal about the captain. She suspected she would get along well with the pirate. So in a habitual motion, that dated back to her childhood aboard the ship, she reached up and put her palms flat to the exposed beam of wizardwood overhead. Vivacia, I'm back. I've come to take you home. The impact slammed her back against the mattress. Dazed, she lay flat, looking up at the ceiling overhead. Had she struck her head somehow? It made no sense. Nothing had hit her, but the sensation was as stunning. She looked at her palms, half expecting them to be reddened. Vivacia? She tried again to sense her ship, but felt nothing. So she slowly reaches out to touch the wizardwood once again, but stops an inch short, a finger's length short. Antagonism radiated from the wood like heat from a fire. She pressed against it. Cold and burning both engulfed her fingers, followed by a spreading numbness. Vivacia, ship, it's me. Althea Vestrit, I've come for you. The opposition to her touch only grew stronger. So Bolt is obviously rejecting as firmly as possible the touch of Althea and the connection with Althea because she doesn't want Vivacia resurfacing.
Right.
She's got a good thing going.
Yeah. So Vivacia needs to be dead.
She's got things to do. She's got serpents to take care of.
Yeah, I find this really interesting, especially because we know that Althea is so naturally open to live ships and is just used to allowing herself to be open in a way that
Right.
Wintrow wasn't when he first got on board, and that we see happening whenever Althea is on other live ships as well.
Yeah.
So it's just something she does unconsciously. But here she is wide open, and Vivacia is really, well, I guess Bolt is holding themselves back from Althea.
Yeah.
And I do wonder, like you said, because obviously Bolt has a lot to do and can't have Vivacia resurfacing. I wonder if that refusal is because if she allowed Althea in at all, Vivacia would return to the surface. Do you think that could be the case, or do you think it's just more anger and bitterness at what Althea has left her?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? It's like a hatred of the Vestrits, but also giving Vivacia that handhold would have Vivacia fight for supremacy again. She doesn't want to have that fight.
But I guess then why wouldn't Wintrow's connection to them bring that fight out?
I think it's still annoying, but Althea had a deeper connection with Vivacia earlier, right? Before
okay.
Vivacia was even aware of anything, I think. So I think like the added connection of both of them.
Right.
I think Wintrow, since Althea doesn't know anything about Bolt,
Right.
I feel like her assertion in her head of like, this is Vivacia, this is as I've always known her, this image in my head
Right.
is much more dangerous than Wintrow's. There is somebody called Bolt. There is a
Right.
different creature here. There is something that isn't Vivacia, but Vivacia isn't lost. That's easier to deal with than Vivacia is just Vivacia.
Right.
So I think those memories would be called a little bit more strongly on Althea's part.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, either way, Althea's very confused at this and doesn't understand why her ship is rejecting her so much. And as she's fighting through this weird rejection, Kennit comes in.
Yes, and from Althea's point of view, he is described as a very handsome and well-groomed man with a large diamond stud in an ear, but he's far from being like a dandy, you know? He's very polished and looks very nicely. Very nice. He had to be Kennit. And he warns her off against trying to touch this ship and connect with the ship. Don't, she'll only hurt you. He seized her wrists in his strong hands and pulled them away from the beam. She felt suddenly dizzied from both the effort and the numbing rejection. She knew that Vivacia had done to her. She knew what Vivacia had done to her. The ship had subtly stirred every self-doubt Althea had ever harbored and awakened in her mind every memory of bad judgment, selfishness, or stupidity that the ship had ever witnessed. She burned with shame at how inferior a person she was, even as logic tried to assert itself. She'll only hurt you, Kennit repeated. He kept possession of her wrists. After one attempt to pull free of him, Althea subsided. He was strong, Better to behave with dignity than react like a thwarted child. So Kennit has brought in a tray that is steaming with some stuff, and then immediately goes to grab her and doesn't let go yet.
Right. And
we can tell, like, he has groomed himself. He has curled and oiled his mustache and dressed very nicely.
right. So obviously he's putting on a show, which isn't surprising for Kennit.
Right.
But also Althea's really sort of out of it in this moment. She's not really sure what to expect. She doesn't know what's going on and is really confused. She's awake from a near-death experience. Obviously, there's a lot going on. And she just doesn't really know. She can't get a grasp on what's going on. And Kenneth's not letting go. And so she just has...
Imagine a ship or someone bringing up every single self-doubt you've ever had, awakening every memory of bad judgment, selfishness, or stupidity that the ship has ever witnessed, and putting them in forefront of your mind.
Yeah.
Like that.
It's so on top of everything else.
You'd be out of it too.
Yes. So Althea's having a bit of a tough time, but she doesn't lose that little spark or attitude that she always has, and she talks back.
Yeah. Why would she try to hurt me? She's my ship. And I'm pleased to meet you also, Althea Vestrit. I trust you feel better. His eyes roved over her frankly. You look much better than when I first fished you out. You vomited quite a quantity of seawater onto my clean deck. It was precisely the right mixture of wryly polished comments to remind her of her manners, situation, and her debt to him. She let her hands relax, and as soon as she did, he released her wrists, giving her hands a reassuring pat in passing. Her cheeks burned. I beg your pardon, she said very sincerely. I presume you are Captain Kennit. I am sure you saved my life, and I do thank you. But to have my own ship so reject me is beyond distressing, she finished lamely. So Kennit is in top form. He is making those little comments to remind her of her manners and kind of embarrass her slightly. It was like, don't get ahead of yourself. Let's make proper introductions. Let's do this the right way.
Yeah.
And also to distract her from those kinds of questions.
Right. And from Althea's point of view, this is really done well because it does feel like just a really kind way to sort of be like, hey, think about the situation you're in. Let's back up a little bit. But knowing Kennit,
it's like, we don't want her to talk about this.
Yeah, we got to change the subject quick. So he does seem to be pretty good at the art of manipulation.
Oh, yeah. Very, very good.
And he does mention that he's sure it is distressing, and then touches the wizard wood and says, for both of you. You both just need time, that's all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he sets his hand to the wizard wood casually, Althea mentions, and basically says to her, both of you are changed. The ship is certainly not the same as she last was when you met her. No creature of any sensitivity could endure what she has and be unchanged by it. Give her time. Take time to meet her and accept her as she is, and be tolerant of her anger. It is well rooted and justified. His warm breath was scented with cloves. Without ceremony, he seated himself on the bed beside her. For now, tell me this. Are you feeling much better? Or are you feeling better? And she says, much better, thank you. So she does get distracted by that and switches to different topics. Kind of does dissuade her from speaking about Vivacia just now because he's given her enough reason and hope for the future that they can fix the issue.
Right. And ultimately, something is wrong there and she's getting nowhere. So obviously, there are a lot of wheels in motion. So it's easy to be distracted by a different one, especially when he asks how she's feeling and she remembers Jack and wants to know where Jack is.
And responds with like 20 questions here.
Yes.
Where is Jack? Is Brashen aboard? Did the serpents damage Paragon much? How did you run them off? My nephew Wintrow, is he alive and well? And eventually Kennit leans forward to set 2 fingers to her lips. She bridled at the touch, then endured it, forcing herself to realize he probably meant nothing by it. Yeah, sure.
In my head, this is like a cheesy romance novel, like play being acted out sort of deal where Kennet's being all suave and romantic and Althea's just like really unaware because she's just not interested. She has Brashen. Why would she fall for a pirate? But the pirate doesn't know that.
He's like circling her like she's a wild animal, just slowly getting used to him touching her in innocuous ways.
Yeah, and I think that is really interesting that that's being placed here where there is discomfort on Althea's part, but he is doing things so subtly and innocuous that like the touching is sort of forgiven and it is easy to write off as like, oh, it's not, I mean, whatever. He doesn't mean anything by it. It's not. And it's just really wearing down
it's so much, this scene is so much more creepy knowing how it ends.
Yeah.
Knowing their story.
Yeah.
First reading through, it's like, yeah, it's okay.
It's a little weird. But
maybe. It maybe will register in your mind that it's a little weird, but it's such a small amount of words in this chapter dedicated to him touching her. Just like, held onto my wrists. Okay, one sentence too long,
Yeah. I feel like when I read it, it felt really weird, but that could be like, I think every woman has been in a situation where a man has done something just a little weird, where it's like on that cusp of, am I overreacting or is he being weird? And so that's what this felt like, even the first time through, of like that like sense of self-doubt of, oh, well, I mean, technically this is justified. And like, if I told somebody I was upset about it, they wouldn't understand.
Haven't had a point of view from a different woman talking to Kennit before.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah. So it's like, I don't know. Like,
so Robin Hobb did a really good job of having you in the same position as Althea here.
Yeah, I really do think she does. I think it really does capture that feeling of like, it seems silly to be upset about this. And
also,
this
is this how Kennit always is?
Yeah. And like, it's really interesting to have that sort of feeling of, ooh, like it doesn't feel right, but why?
Yeah.
And like as rereaders, we know why, but I don't know. I just think it's really done well. And this is like definitely from my personal lived experience, a very unfortunately familiar feeling of, am I being dramatic or is this weird? And I don't know. It's just really written well.
So he says hush as he's kind of doing the motion to shush her as well. It says one thing at a time. Jack is sleeping right now. Serpent probably brushed her. She's recovering. I gave her poppy syrup for the pain. For now, I suggest we do not disturb her. And then she asks again, okay, then who took care of me? Put me to bed here. Her hand reached reflexively to the buttoned collar of the nightshirt. I did. He spoke quietly without looking at her. A smile teased at the corner of his mouth, but he kept it at bay. It was scarcely a duty I would entrust to my deck hands, and there are no women on board. Althea's face burned.
Again, weird and uncomfortable.
A good explanation because there,
it's
a pirate ship. I think it would be worse if it was, one of my deckhands did it. Like that's a little bit worse.
But still,
in Althea's point of view, but we know it's not the only reason,
right? But still, like while she was passed out, did something to her that she had no control of and could not like say anything about, and I don't know. And it's just a weird, like, I guess what was alternative? It's not like he could leave her in the wet clothes.
Right.
But yeah, just really uncomfortable. Not great.
Then he says, I brought you something.
Right. To get past the awkwardness for both of them, obviously.
She notices that despite his missing leg, he moved with the rolling grace of a true seaman. She moved her legs to make a place for the tray. He set it down and then took a place next to it. This is wine and brandy, mulled with spices. It's an old Divvytown recipe, very warming, very restoring, and excellent for pain. Do try some while I talk. It is best when it is warmest. So she gets some mulled wine.
Yep.
Which is fantastic.
10 out of 10.
So she sips it, and she's like, oh, yeah, that actually is really good. Let me drink some more.
Right.
And then Kennit, while she's drinking, kind of fills her in a little bit. Let me see. Wintrow is not on board the ship at the moment. He is serving on the Marietta under Sorkor, my second in command. I have discovered that moving a promising man from ship to ship and giving him shifting responsibilities encourages him to develop his seamanship and his ability to think for himself. You have realized, no doubt, that you occupy his room and his bed just now. Don't trouble yourself about that. He is perfectly comfortable where he is, and I know he would begrudge you nothing. Thank you, she said carefully. She tried to compose her thoughts. Kennit obviously thought of Wintrow as his, someone to train up for heavier responsibility, like a son in a family business. She had never envisioned this situation, and she could not decide how to react to it. It is kind of you to afford him such opportunities. Part of her was shocked at the words that she said. Kind of him to afford Wintrow the opportunity to become a better pirate? She tried to force order on her thoughts. I must ask this. How does Vivacia react to Wintrow being gone? It is not good for a live ship to be left alone without a family member. Please, drink while it's warm, he encouraged her, and she obeyed, and then continues to explain. So we get a little lie here from Kennit, like, oh yeah, I'm just teaching Wintrow everything by moving him around and seeing how different ships work.
And he's been gone for a while, not hours.
And then explains that, the ship does not miss Wintrow. She's fine with me. I've discovered that family is not so important to a ship as a kindred spirit. Vivacia and I share many of the same qualities. A love for adventure, a hatred for the slave trade, a desire to... I think I know my own ship, Althea broke in. But Kennit's mild blue glance gently reproved her. She lifted the bowl and drank from it to cover her discomfiture. The warmth of the liquor was spreading through her now, relaxing her. A wave of vertigo swept her. She felt Kennit's hands steady the bowl she held. So again, he's very good at kind of moving the situation, being like, I'm speaking, don't interrupt me. And then she feels embarrassed, and then she drinks more.
It does really give off that feeling of a kid speaking to an adult in a weird way.
It does. It feels like Althea is getting admonished for not speaking properly in society.
Yeah. It's a really good manipulation on Kennit's part to use the societal expectations that would have been placed on her and playing to that and putting her in this position where she is lesser than, she's not equal to him, she needs to defer to him.
Or at least, play nicely in a conversation and don't just demand things.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm. So he's very sympathetic now, like, oh, you're dizzy. You must be more weary than you know. My careless words have distressed you as well. I'm sure this is difficult for you to face. You probably thought you were coming to rescue the ship and the nephew, but instead you find that we would be tearing them away from the world that they love. Please, rest for a time before we talk more. Your exhaustion is making you see the worst side of everything. Wintrow is strong and happy and convinced that he has discovered Saw's will for him. The ship is avid in her pursuit of slavers and enjoys the adventure of the life we lead. You should rejoice for them. And you are safely aboard your family ship. From this moment, things can only get better for you. So she finished her drink. And he takes the bowl, catches her as she's swaying, because we know that he spiked it.
Yes.
To make her pass out. And she thinks, he smells nice. Sandalwood, cloves. She leaned her head against the shoulder of a fine blue jacket. The lace at his neck tickled against her face. Lace would do well on Brashen, and a jacket such as this. But she says out loud, I like lace on a man. Kennit clears his throat, and she felt her face flush. I'm dizzy, she apologized, trying to straighten herself. It's gone straight to my head. I shouldn't have drunk it so fast. He's like, no, that's all right. You're expecting too much of yourself. Here, lie back. And she thinks, a gentleman to the bone. He evaded her embarrassment. So basically then, says, oh no, don't worry about the storm, because she's asking about it because the room seems to be rocking around her. It's like, this isn't a storm. It's just a squall. It'll pass soon. You're safe here. And she passes out, basically.
He says, here in the Pirate Isles, we can consider this only a squall. We'll be out of it soon. We'll anchor in a sheltered cove and let this pass. Don't be concerned. Vivacia can handle a much harder blow than this. I know. I remember. She expected him to leave. So, even in this state, she's still sort of, this is my ship. Why wouldn't I know that?
Right.
Of course Vivacia can handle it. But as he stays watching her as she's kind of falling asleep, it reminds her of her father because Kennit also has dark hair, and how when she was little and there were storms, this is the safest place to be, and her father would make her feel safe. And she sort of drifts off feeling like she's safe and cared for because she's with Vivacia.
Yeah, all would be safe, all would be well. There was a strong man in command of the ship and a steady hand on the wheel. She closed her eyes. And then we move on to Kennet's point of view right after this.
Right.
Right after his manipulations.
And he's standing above her as she sleeps.
Yeah. So again, in this section, we will be discussing his thoughts on Althea. So if you want to skip ahead, don't be afraid to do so. But yeah, he's looking down and seeing that the eyelashes on her cheek were not as so long as Wintrow's, but even up close, the resemblance was uncanny. He pulled up the blankets and tucked them securely around her. She did not stir, and he wasn't surprised. He'd already tested the mixture of poppy and mandrake in brandy on Jack. She would sleep deeply, and he would have time to ponder his role and how to deal with her questions.
So again, we see his fascination with how much Althea looks like Wintrow,
Yeah.
but also get confirmation that he has done something to the drink he gave her.
Yes. And again, this is just like, oh, I need time to figure out all my lies.
Yeah.
And he's like going through them. He's like, oh, Paragon had perished with all hands. So sad. Serpents had attacked in response to Brashen's arrows. It might work as long as she never spoke to any of the other crew. Could he keep her that isolated without rousing her suspicions? It was going to be difficult to concoct the right lies, but something would come to him.
Gotta trust his luck.
Yeah. He stood a time longer looking down on her. She was Wintrow in female form. With his forefinger, he traced the curve of her cheek, the arch of her brow, and the flare of her nostrils. Bingtown trader stock, well born and raised well. There was no mistaking one's own kind. When he bent over and kissed her, her lax lips were warm. Her unresponsive mouth teased his with the taste of the spices and brandy. And this is where he says he could take her if he wanted to, and she wouldn't even know. No one would know. Such an amusing idea curved his lips in a true smile. His fingers started at the top button of the nightshirt, his own nightshirt, he thought. It was as if he undressed himself. You only want her because she resembles the boy, the charm said snidely. So the charm interrupts this.
Yes, the charm doesn't just let this happen, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Kennit freezes and looks down. Were there truly blue sparks in the carved wood in the eyes, or did he imagine them? The etched mouth turned down in disgust at him. And you only want the boy because he so reminds you of yourself at that age. Only in reality, you were much younger when Ygritte draped you to his bed.
So now we get the revelation of what exactly happened.
Yeah, to Kennit when he
Yeah.
was young. And it just enhances the horribleness that went on that we know of
Right.
with Paragon and Kennit.
Well, because we know he was beat to near death multiple times, I think, at this
Mhm.
point, but we
Yeah.
didn't know that he was also being sexually abused as a child. And so this little note of it's because of what happened to you that you're interested in Wintrow, and
You're only interested in Wintrow because he reminds you of you.
yeah, which is a really interesting thing.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to talk about.
Yeah.
Because in the modern times, we know that the cycle of abuse is a myth.
Right.
It's like it's not an actual thing. Abused people don't abuse other people. Like that's not like an actual thing that
Right.
is set in stone and happens.
It like has to happen. I mean,
Right.
obviously they can.
But yes, they
But-
can.
It's not a guarantee. It's not
Right.
absolutely going to happen.
But I think Robin Hobb wrote Kennet's character kind of like that and leaning into that, where he's so obsessed with getting rid of the image of what Ygritte ever did that it's playing for him over and over that he needs to erase anything that Ygritte did. So he's fine leaning into that role. I don't know. It's so
Yeah.
weird to me. Like it doesn't quite match up.
Yeah, I don't really know either. And it's kind of weird because obviously Kennit does care a lot about Wintrow. That's really clear. And
Yeah.
the first time they met, I think I commented on how Kennit is obsessed or like really focusing in on how beautiful Wintrow is.
Right.
But then we don't really see that as much anymore. It's more about how smart he is and how he's a good lad. And
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like a sexual attraction.
No.
Not that it super felt like that the first time they met, but it was more easy to see that. And
Yeah.
here,
The language has changed
yeah,
over the time that they spent together. And really the connection first came because the charm spoke up.
right. And now for the charm to say you want the boy, you want Althea only because you want Wintrow, and you only want Wintrow because he makes you think of yourself, is so interesting to me because
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily feel like that's the truth.
Yeah, right. I
And
know.
I guess if you went back and read all the times that he's jealous about the attention that Etta is giving to Wintrow, you could potentially read it as his jealousy towards Etta getting to give attention to Wintrow instead of,
Jealousy that Etta is giving attention away, not to him.
yeah, but it
Yeah.
doesn't feel like that's right. I mean, you could
Right.
read it that way, but I don't personally feel like that's how it felt when I was
Mhm.
reading it. But I don't, it just like is such a weird revelation to have here of no, Kennit has feelings for Wintrow.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like the first time I read through it, it kind of came out of nowhere, like the last two chapters, because it's obvious that something is weird where he fixates on, it's Althea is Wintrow in
Yeah.
female form. And, you know, it's just like Wintrow, and he's contemplating all these thoughts about Althea. And you're like, this kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I don't know if this makes sense, but it almost feels to me like I feel like I'm going to say something and it's not going to make sense, but it feels like Kennit is straight. Like he's a straight man. Not that
Yes.
gay people are predators, but like I feel like Kennit is a straight man and Wintrow is everything he wants his partner to be, but he's not attracted to Wintrow because Wintrow is a man.
Yeah.
And so seeing Wintrow's equal, but female in looks at least, it's like, oh, well, I can put Wintrow's personality onto this person that looks just like
Yeah.
Wintrow. And
That kind of gives an aspect that, and maybe it even plays into what the charm is saying. It's like, oh, you only want Wintrow because he reminds you of you. Is that Kennit is so narcissistic that he can only have sex with himself?
yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Etta is slight figured and
Yeah, we talked
dark
about
hair.
that too.
Yeah.
Where like Etta, in all other descriptors,
Yeah.
looks like a boy.
Yeah.
Like, it is like flat chested, looks like a plank, I think she's described as at one
Yes.
point.
Not exactly.
She's not traditionally feminine or traditionally attractive.
Yes. And we know that Althea is also not curvy. She's not necessarily, what is like more of a
She passed
traditional
herself off as a ship's boy for a while.
She also does not have that traditional feminine figure.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting that he would also be attracted to that.
There's,
I don't know.
There's a lot of different things that kind of hint towards the narcissistic side, because the phrasing, his fingers started on the top of the button of the nightshirt, his own nightshirt, he thought, and it was as if he undressed himself.
Yeah. I don't think that his love for Wintrow, if there is love, is sexual. And I don't think that it comes from a place of wanting to be sexual.
He just sees himself in Wintrow.
Yes. And I think for him, and obviously in some way he sees himself in Etta and therefore also in Althea. And I think to him to completely have control over that self, he has to take them.
Yeah.
And I think because we know that's how he would treat Etta when he was sleeping with Etta when she was at the whorehouse, he was raping her, or he was. It's not rape because in that sense it was consensual. It was the job she was doing. It was just the way he acted it out was consensual, non-consensual sex, I guess. Closer to that.
Well, it was like, you don't do anything.
Yeah. Just
don't say anything. Just like lay there.
Lay there. Don't touch me. This isn't. Yeah. So I find it really interesting because I've been trying to grapple with this fact of this love for Wintrow, quote unquote, and how this whole thing plays out because it doesn't feel like he has attraction to Wintrow.
Right. So if we're playing armchair psychologist here, it's all about kind of gaining, and we talked about this a little bit before too.
Yeah.
I think maybe when we were talking about Edda's looks the last time is that, and throughout the whole trilogy here, that Kennit is all about gaining agency over his past, gaining control of his legacy and erasing Ygritte's legacy. So if we're all kind of piecing that together, the only reason why he is attracted to people who he sees himself in is to gain control over that past and make things different, because he sees himself in these people, and because specifically Wintrow really like brings to mind his past self.
Yeah.
He needs to make things turn out differently for them. Yes, there's still tools to him, of course, but this specific aspect, which is then translated over to Althea because she looks so much like Wintrow, he needs to make sure things don't go the same way that they went when Ygritte was in control of him.
Right.
I don't know. I think it makes some twisted sense in his mind, but I agree with you that it's like to kind of regain a sense of control in his mind.
Yeah. And it's definitely not right. And I'm not saying it's excusable in any way.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
But I do think that it makes sense from if you think about his point of view and his character, that like in his twisted mind, the act of taking control of someone fully with sex, rape, is the ultimate control. And especially if he's putting himself...
Just sex, if we're talking about Edda as well.
Edda, right. Sex and rape with each woman. It's putting himself in control of himself again. Yeah. And it's not letting Ygritte do what he did. Mm-hmm. It's him taking that back in some weird way. And I think... I don't know. I think the thing with Wintrow is there is none of that sexualness. Like, he's not sexually attracted to Wintrow, so he wouldn't do that to Wintrow.
Yeah.
But having the opportunity to do it to Wintrow, but have it be a woman, is much better to him, because it's like, oh, all that pent up, like, that's me and I need to take control. And the only way I know how, I'll do that to the woman version of Wintrow, and it counts. And I don't know. So I think I wanted to discuss this because...
It's very important to discuss this because this plays into the future chapters.
Yes.
Heavily.
It does. And I think I've really been struggling because I know later in the next Rainwild trilogy, there are gay characters. Mm-hmm. And I think... I don't know. I'm not going to I don't think we know for sure about anybody. I guess... Beloved admits to liking Fitz next trilogy, but that's like a weird situation, so we won't get into that. But that being said, I don't think Robin Hobb shies away from writing LGBT characters like outright, but I don't think Kennit is gay in any sense. I don't think, like, I personally don't read him as even pan or bi. Like, I really think he's straight. And the weird, like, Wintrow Althea thing is nothing to do
like
with his sexual. Yeah, I don't think it's his sexual attraction to Wintrow that is making him want to have sex with Althea. I think it's his need for control.
Yeah. And again, like, this is a written character. We don't know psychology.
Yeah, I'm not a professional.
We are trying to dissect this character in the terms of these books. So if you try to translate Kennit to a real world person, we have no idea if that makes sense even.
Yeah.
But in the world, I think that does make sense. And I agree with your theory there.
Right. And obviously, with real people, you would never, ever give them a label of straight or gay or whatever. Like, you don't get to choose.
Right.
However, since this is a fictional character,
Yeah.
I feel comfortable saying, I believe this man is straight.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know. I think there is a lot of nuance to this conversation. And I really always do want to try to be as clear as possible.
Yeah.
Because obviously real people can be affected by how you talk about these things.
By how we talk about these things. And a lot of people who read these books are like they see themselves in these characters, or can relate to the events that happen to these characters, whether it's this or other things.
Right. And
so it's very hard to have discussions about difficult topics like this and be clear that we are specifically speaking in the book.
Yes.
Rather than relating it to any sort of event that may have happened outside the books.
Right. Exactly. And obviously, if somebody sees themselves in Kennit, I don't want them to think that I personally think they're a trash person and they're definitely straight, but have weird sex fetishes or whatever. No, that is not the case. Like, you can read yourself into any character you want, and that doesn't say necessarily say anything about you, that what I'm saying about this character. But yeah. And I don't know the best way to discuss it. And so, like, if I've said something wrong, I do like when we have our readers, or our listeners, not readers, our listeners write in to let us know that we phrased something wrong, because I do want to be careful. I don't want to do blanket statements, and I don't want to make it seem like everything is I'm correct and this is ultimately the correct way to view things.
Because there's a lot of nuanced conversations that I've kind of that I've read online about this topic, because it's hard to talk about, and it's not clear.
No.
Robin Hobb doesn't leave it in a black and white terms of here is what Kennit did and what he has wrong with him, and why he did what he did.
Exactly. But I think since this is our podcast and we are doing a deep dive into this, I think we do have a responsibility to talk about it. And I think even though it's uncomfortable to talk about this, we still want to try to still want to try to talk and discuss our thoughts on the matter and leave the door open for others to join in the conversation, because it is a really hard topic and it's not pleasant. It's not a fun thing to discuss, but I think it is important to discuss because it is so integral to Kennit and his character and what he does. And so I don't know. I think it's important to think about where his motivations come from and why. And especially because it straight up says that he only likes Althea because he likes Wintrow. I just thought that was so interesting, because I really have been looking and I haven't been able to see what I felt were signs that he liked Wintrow. I mean, there are some
like weird things, like, oh, his eyelashes are so long and whatever,
his perfect face was marred by that one tattoo. Like, there's
weird things like that, but it's not consistent.
No, and it doesn't feel, I don't know.
Anyways, that's kind of,
So I wanted to talk about my personal feelings on the matter. And obviously I'm not a professional. I don't know things. I just have read the book.
We don't even know if those things exist in the real world.
Yeah.
It's just this is our justifications for how Kennit is acting.
Yes. So this is how I personally am rationalizing what's going on.
Yeah. But the charm speaks up and says those things. It really stops this moment. And Kennit's like, shut up. Those memories were forbidden. They had all gone to the bottom with Paragon. What else had all this been for if not to destroy those memories? For the charm to speak such words endangered everything. Everything. He knew now he would have to destroy the thing. It won't help, the charm mocked him. Destroy me and Bolt will know why. But I tell you this. Take this woman against her will, and the whole ship will know why you wanted her. I will see to it. And I will see that Wintrow is the first to know. Why? What do you want of me? I want Etta back on this ship, and Wintrow, for my own reasons. I warn you, both Bolt and I would find rape extremely distasteful. Among dragons it is not done. A scrap of a charm no bigger than a walnut claims to be a dragon. One does not need the size of a dragon to have the soul of a dragon. Take your hands off her. He slowly complied. I'm not afraid of you, Kennit says. As for Althea, I will have her. Of her own free will. You will see. Ship, woman, and boy, all will be mine.
So, yeah.
He only says one woman at the end. Ship,
Yeah.
woman, and boy.
Yeah, not women. Woman.
Yeah. That has served her purpose if there's
Yeah.
a female Wintrow.
True. Not needed.
Yeah, but the charm is being like, I want Etta and Wintrow back on the ship.
Yeah.
That's interesting to me because, yes, the charm wooed Etta, right? Made Etta kind of stay along.
Yeah.
Has the charm ever spoken to Wintrow except for 1 or 2 times? I think like recently, right? It happened.
There is, I don't know. There has been once or twice where it's
There
talked, but
hasn't been like a major thing.
And he hasn't talked to Kennit about liking Wintrow, I don't think.
I feel like it might just be a limiting factor on Kennit. Just like you have to have them around because you have to check your behavior if they're on board.
Right. Like maybe he won't be as bad in front of Wintrow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. It is really interesting. And it's interesting too that we have this little insight of he's protecting Althea because rape isn't good in dragon society. Like it's not done. But then later, Bolt doesn't seem to have much issue with what Kennit has done.
I don't remember her exact reaction because there's also like the Vivacia thing.
Yeah.
So we'll have to wait, I think.
Right. But I guess this was really interesting to me because
you don't remember like a visceral, bad reaction from her.
To be fair, reading the chapter and everything that happens after is really hard for me personally. And so I could have just blocked out most of what happened. I might just not be remembering it because I don't love that whole thing. Not that anybody would, but yeah.
We've got like a month before you read that chapter, I think.
Yeah.
Because the next chapter is rain, at least for part of it.
Yeah.
So
that topic in general is really hard for me personally. And so I could just be misremembering. But like in my mind, nobody really cares when she tells people. Yeah. And like, so it's interesting to me that here the charm is threatening, like, I'll tell everyone.
And you don't remember any of that.
And I don't remember the charm really actually coming through on that threat. So
yeah, well,
I don't know. So we'll get there. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
We'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the end of Kennit's point of view for now. I think we do jump back to him at the end of the chapter, as I mentioned before. But we are moving on to Paragon's point of view once again. And he's saying, how had Amber known just where to put her hands to reach each of them, both of them, all of him at once? This is what I was thinking, a couple episodes ago when I thought, or maybe it was end of last episode.
Yes.
It's like, I'm pretty sure Amber finds that secret spot to put her hands. I don't know if this is the actual spot where Kennit put his hands, but it's where she's touching both different logs of wizard wood at once.
Yeah, and with her skill hands, which Paragon doesn't know.
One of her skill hands. The other one is not skilled. There's only one of her hands that has silver on them.
I thought both had silver tips.
Nope, only one, actually. She wears gloves on both, but it's only one.
I guess, yeah, because why would you only wear one glove?
Yeah.
Well, Michael Jackson did it.
Michael Jackson, yeah.
He's not around to start that fashion, though. Okay, so anyway, the one skilled hand.
Yeah. But, we left off with Paragon as Amber was listening to the other voices. And now her bare fingers pressed his wood and she was open to him. If he had wanted, he could have reached into her and plumbed all of her secrets, but he did not wish to know any more of her than he already did. He only wanted her to give up and die peacefully. Why would she not do that for him? He had always been a friend to her. But she ignored him now, reaching past him to speak to the others that shared his wood. She spoke to him, but they listened, and their listening echoed through him, vibrating his soul. Now we get a very interesting perspective in this chapter.
Yes.
We get to see both of his dragon selves talking.
Yeah.
And Paragon just kind of in the background listening and once in a while protesting as well.
Right. And also, I did want to quick point out that it is really sad that Paragon thinks, why won't she just die for me and not make it harder on me? Because to
I was
him,
a friend.
yeah, to him, that's
What you do for
love.
friends.
That's what you do for
Mhm.
people you love is you die for them without complaint. Don't make it harder on them,
Yeah.
which is really sad.
So Amber here is begging for her life. It's like, I need to live. There's so much more. Like, any bargain that we can strike, tell me, ask of me anything. Help us live. Close up your seams. Stop the water flowing. And against his wisdom, Paragon speaks up like, please, just let go. Be still. Be silent. We will die together. So then Amber's like, oh, Paragon responded. Okay.
Yeah.
Why? Why do you have to die? What changed? Why are you doing this? Why can't we live? And Paragon thinks like, oh, she's never going to understand, but I'll try anyways. The memories have to die. If no one remembers them anymore, then he can live as if they never happened. So Kennit gave the memories to me, and I was to die with them, and that one of us could live free. They were listening still, both of them. The greater spoke suddenly, his thoughts ringing through his half of the hall. It doesn't work that way. Silencing memories does not make them stop existing. Events cannot be undone by forgetting them. He felt Amber's shock. Valiantly, she tried to overcome it. She spoke to him as if she had not felt the greater. Why does Kennit do this to you? How can he? What is Kennit to you? And this is where Paragon reveals it. He cannot conceal his love for him, he says, but he reveals that he is a Ludluck and that they are family. And a Bingtown trader's son took a pirate isle's bride. Kennit was their child, his son, his prince, and my playmate, the one who finally loved me for myself. You are not a Ludluck, the greater interrupted him. We are dragons. Yes, we are dragons, and we wish to live. It was the lesser, managing to insert a thought of his own. Silence, the greater one quashed him. Paragon's list became more marked as the greater asserted his control. Who are you? Amber asked in confusion. Paragon, why are there dragons in you? The greater laughed. Paragon knew better than to try to reply. So now Amber moves to begging them.
Yeah. I think this is really interesting to see what Paragon thinks of his dragon self finally.
Yeah.
Greater and lesser. Also, notably, both are given he, him pronouns. So both sets of planks just happen to be male dragons,
Yeah.
and Paragon is a male figurehead. So once again, we have no disconnect there.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that really interesting. Like, what a weird happenstance.
Again, I think it's just kind of the carvers seem to have their thoughts influenced by the dragons.
Yeah.
In their
could be.
cocoons.
Either way, now Amber is
Begging the dragons.
the dragons.
Please let me live. Do you deserve to live? The greater demanded of her. He spoke with Paragon's mouth in Paragon's voice, taking control of the figurehead and booming his voice into the wind. It did not matter to him that Amber heard his thought through her hands. He spoke as he did, Paragon knew, to prove to the ship how strong he had grown. If you did, you would see it as right now within your power to save all of us. But if you are too stupid to see how, I think we should all die here together. Tell her how, pleaded the lesser. It is our time, come again, and you will let us die because a human is stupid? No, tell her, let her save us so we can go on, and silence, weakling. You have kept company with humans too long. The strong survive. Trapped as we are in this body, we are better off dead if the humans aboard us are stupid. So let her show us that she can make our life worth the living. If she can fathom how to live, we will let her give us eyes again. A paragon we shall be, but not paragon of the Ludlucks. Paragon of the dragons, two made into one. What of me? Paragon cried out wildly. He gripped his beard and dragged at it fiercely. But what of me? Be with us, or do not be. That is the only choice that remains to you. The serpent spoke true. There remains to us a duty to our own, and no other dragon or dragon-made ship has the right to deny it to us. We can be only one. Be one with us, or do not be. So, okay, we have to dissect this a little bit before we get to the later half.
Yep.
So there is a greater side of the dragon and a lesser dragon and Paragon.
Mm-hmm.
The greater dragon kind of scares Paragon
Yeah.
because he can overpower the lesser. He makes his list happen even more strongly if he's asserting his power, but also can take control of the figurehead.
Yeah.
This is similar to what Bolt can do to Vivacia, but Bolt kind of shoved Vivacia down forever.
Yeah.
And it seems that the greater and the lesser halves just don't care to take control ever.
Yeah.
And that's why they haven't.
Yeah, they're
But
kind of like, whatever.
But sometimes they speak and he starts bickering with them amongst himself. And some memories surface and he has to push them down with his other lives that also make Paragon crazy.
Right. Yeah. Paragon just has the worst luck.
Yeah. He has the blood luck. All of it went to Kennit. But yeah, so the dragon is like, you can save us right now, Amber. You know everything that you need to know to save yourself, the humans, and us. So figure it out, or
Prove
none
yourself.
of us deserve to live.
Yeah. Prove yourself worthy.
Mm-hmm. And then he says, like, if you do that, then I'll let you give us eyes again.
Which is an interesting response because, first of all, let her.
If he
Second
can take
of all,
control of the figurehead, he can kill her.
oh, true. Good point. But I was going to say, because Paragon already asked to have eyes, so does that mean before now they would have been like, no, we don't want eyes?
I don't know. I don't know if they would have cared.
Mm.
I don't know if they would have cared at all because now they have a reason now that they know that serpents
Yeah.
need to go to the changing thing and that another live ship said like, no, you can die. The dragons, I think, are very offended that another trapped dragon would be like, no, these ones can die. I can lead them.
Yeah.
Because all dragons are kind of striving to survive, right?
Right. That should be the goal.
Yeah. So I think that kind of roused them. And
They're
the
like,
serpent
"Hold
that
on."
was needling them, Carrion, really
Mhm.
got to them as well.
Fair.
So the greater says that, you know, like, be one with us or do not be. We will be two made into one. And Paragon's like, I want to be Paragon still. I'm a Ludluck. But Amber switches over and says, like, how can I save you or save myself? Like, fire is above us, water is below. We're dying. Think, prove yourself worthy. For an instant, Amber rallied. She reached strongly after the greater as if she would steal from him what she must know. Then a fit of coughing shook her. As the coughing passed, Amber faded from Paragon's awareness. He felt her pass to transparency and then nothingness. As she died, he felt both grief and relief. The heaviness of the cold water in him dragged him down. The waves were getting taller. He's like, soon, you know, the waves are going to wash over my deck. It's all ending soon. Now the fire and the smoke had accomplished their work. Then, like an arrow striking home to a target, Amber was suddenly within him. She gasped as she plunged deep into the memories of dragonkind. Paragon felt her floundering, overwhelmed by the unending chain of memories, going from dragon to serpent, back beyond to the very first egg. She could not hold it all. He felt her drowning in the memories. She fought valiantly, searching for what the greater withheld from her as he allowed his memories to flood her. So, we know what came first, the chicken or the egg. It was the egg.
Yep. The very first egg.
It is not in my memory, but in your own, little fool, he told her. He witnessed her struggling as one watches tree sap flow over a trapped ant.
I thought the use of little fool was nicely done.
Yes.
As
yes.
rereaders who know this is beloved. And in a way, it could have been helpful to her to rein herself back in.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I'm fool. Like, you named me.
Yeah.
It's not just saying, you know, you don't need to do this. It's actually centering herself because she is fool.
Yeah, that is one of her names.
Mm-hmm. So she wrenches clear of Paragon, and Paragon felt her fall and knew that she had dragged in breath after smoky breath, striving for fresh air that was not there. So she begins to fade again. But slowly she lifts her head and she announces, I know what it is. I know how to save us, but I will not buy my life at Paragon's expense. I will save us if you promise me this. You will be not two made one, but three. Paragon must be preserved in you. He could feel her fear, but he was struck dumb by the idea that someone would be willing to die rather than betray him. Done, the Greater announced. A faint thread of admiration shimmered through his words. This one has a heart worthy of being partnered with a dragon ship. Now let her prove she has a mind as well. So Paragon feels that the seams are slowly closing up right now.
Right. I do want to, before we go into that, talk about his shock that somebody would rather die than betray him.
Yeah. That's a new feeling for himself.
Yeah.
He thought only he could do that for other people.
Right. And not only that, but only other people would ask that of him.
Yeah.
And that nobody would do that without being asked. Like maybe he could ask her to do it, but
also huge risk on Amber's part. Like she found the answer. She could have saved herself, but needs to preserve Paragon because I think she had that premonition. She needs Paragon to get the future that she wants.
I guess it could be that, or it could just be, I think Amber and Beloved in general is just highly swayed by the people they like that are around them.
Yes, but think of what happens that Paragon's around still and not subsumed by dragons. They get the knowledge to go to Key Island.
True.
The mother brings the logbooks back on and they speak of Kennit, and Paragon gets a little bit more sane, and then they sail to Kennit, and Kennit is welcomed with open arms and dies in them.
Yeah.
Becomes like a solid, not fully sane, but stable being.
Yeah.
If it was just a dragon ship like Bolt, I think they would be forced to follow the serpents because Brashen wouldn't be able to control anything.
Okay, yeah. Fair enough.
I think it would be kind of the same situation as Bolt and Kennit, where they'd have to make a deal.
So you don't think it was for her love of Paragon? It was more for the love of the future.
I think it's also that, sure. Like, yeah, it's the
Both
same with the fool, right? Like,
yeah.
The fool saves Fitz for the future, but also for the love of Fitz.
Okay, fair enough.
You can't have one without the other, really, you know?
Fair. Yeah, so the gamble pays off.
Mm-hmm.
And...
Sorry, I misread the end part of that. Paragon tries to close up the seams, but the dragons have control. So he fed her strength, such as he could, pouring it from his wood into the frail body that rested against him. So then she has strength enough to call out for Clef.
And then we switch over to Brashen.
Yes, who is desperately trying to continue to rally the sailors to continue to pump out the water, to try to ram the overhead door to the deck.
Right. And this is tough because they're breathing in smoke, and that's going to kill them.
Yeah.
So it's just really tough right now to get people to even have enough strength to do what needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
But he's trying to stay positive. Maybe something will happen. Mm-hmm. And he's kind of frustrated that it's happening at all.
Right. Yeah. He does say that there's still a little bit of a chance left to save the ship because wood takes a long time to kindle. We know that. But it's in writing here that Brashen does think that there's a little bit of time if they get out very soon.
Yeah. And
good luck for him.
Yes. Yeah. And then Clef comes up to him to talk about Amber, which he says, yeah, just take care of her as much as you can with what time is left. And he says, no, she has a message for you, and reminds him of the trapdoor.
Yes. She said to tell you, try the other hatch, the one in your cabin. It took a moment for the boy's words to penetrate. Then Brashen shouted, come on, bring the ram. He snatched down a lantern and staggered off without waiting to see if anyone followed. He cursed his own stupidity. When Amber had lived aboard at the beach to Paragon, she had used the captain's quarters as her bedroom, but stored her woodworking supplies below in the hold. For her convenience, she had cut a trapdoor in the floor of the room. Both Althea and Brashen had been horrified when they discovered it. Amber had repaired the floor, bracing it from below and pegging it together well, but all the bracing for it was below and accessible from this level. Paragon's hatch covers had been designed to withstand the pounding of the sea, but the trapdoor inside his stateroom had been nailed and braced shut only. So this one is much weaker than the deck hatch because you can knock out the bracing and they splinter it after 4 or 5 tries.
Right. And he does, when he first comes to it, get a little bit nervous because Amber was really thorough with her work and she is a good carpenter. So it has been patched really well. However, he uses a hammer and a crowbar and sort of loosens the brace so that they can have a better chance, and it works, like you said.
So finally, it gives way, and the planks of the patch cascaded bruisingly down around him. He jumped, caught the edge of the hole, and hauled himself up. The wall of the room was burning, but the fire had not spread within yet. Get up here! Get out while you can! So he hauls up Clef, and then a quick glance shows that Paragon is alone in the water, and a single white serpent circled curiously. The pouring rain was an ally in putting out the fire, but by itself it would not be enough. So he drags smoldering debris off the top of the main hatch, undogged it, and flung it open. So he flings up the main hatch as well and starts yelling, like, get up here, get everyone on deck except for the pump crew, clear this. He starts coughing to clear his lungs, but men begin dragging themselves up onto the deck.
Right. And the plan is to clear away the burning debris and put out the fire and then right the ship.
The cold downpour was as blinding as the smoke had been, but at least the air was breathable. Paragon, close up your seams. Why are you trying to kill us? Why? The figurehead did not respond, and Brashen can tell that the knotted muscles showed tension in his posture. As he watched, the white serpent rose before them. It cocked its main head and stared with gleaming red eyes up at the figurehead. It vocalized at the ship, but received no answer. Clef says that he went back for Amber and she's safe now. So he yells again, Brashen does, Paragon, close up your seams. Clef tugged at Brashen's sleeve. He looked down at the boy's puzzled, upturned face. He already did. Didn't you feel it? No, I didn't. Brashen seized hold of the railing, trying to will contact with the figurehead. There was nothing. I don't feel him at all. I do. I feel them both, Clef said cryptically. An instant later, he warned, hang tight, sir. And with startling suddenness, the ship leveled itself. So as it subsided, as the sloshing subsided, Brashen heard wild oaths of amazement, and he grinned into the darkness. They were riding low, but they were level. So everything's kind of evening out here, and he says, ship, my ship, I knew you wouldn't let us die. It weren't him, at least not exactly. The boy's voice was dropping to a mumble. It's them and him, the dragons. Brashen caught the boy as he sagged to the deck. I've been dreaming them for a while now. Thought they was just a dream. So again, we see evidence here of a young boy kind of being bonded to dragons at a very young age because he's around them when they awaken. Only this time, it's when a Liveship dragon awakens or asserts dominance rather than Tintaglia and Selden.
Right.
And it's not necessarily like an Elderling kind of situation, but it's at least a sensitivity to the dragon thoughts.
Exactly, because apparently Clef has been dreaming of the dragons. And so I think that's a really interesting touch. And once again, has a person who is open to whatever this magic is.
Right.
In a way that they're not aware of necessarily. And it's just a natural thing that they're doing.
And that's why Clef can feel what is happening now and Brashen cannot. Because Brashen has a connection just to Paragon. And Paragon is kind of being combined 3 into 1.
Right. And
like
I'm
they're
sure,
becoming a new being.
Yes. And I'm sure Paragon also has cut off the contact with Brashen because of what's going on.
Yeah.
So there's also that aspect of Paragon doesn't want to be reached right now.
Yeah. Please leave a message.
Yeah. But the dragons.
He'll get back to you when he becomes 3 people in one again.
The Holy Trinity, if you will.
Yes. Yeah. So we end Paragon's point, or Brashen's point of view on Paragon. They are saved. They are level. The fire is out.
Things are looking safe
Yep.
for them. Safer.
Safer. They are pumping water. I mean, things are still kind of a mess.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of sails are burned right now, but they're alive for now. And we switch back over to Kennit's point of view as the last point of view in the chapter. And a little time has passed, and he's a bit mad and annoyed because Wintrow and Etta were being brought aboard. Frustration threatened to consume him. He had anchored in the cove to wait out the squall and decide what he wished to do. He had hoped more time alone with Althea, not to mention Bolt. I did not send for you, he greeted Etta coldly as she came aboard. She seemed undaunted by his rebuke. I know. I thought to take advantage of the lull in the storm to return, whether I commanded it or not. She halted without touching him, plainly puzzled. There was hurt as she complained. It didn't occur to me that you might not want me to return. Jola looked at him oddly, and Kennit was well aware that the crew liked Etta and romanticized his relationship to the whore. With things as unsettled as they were now, there was no sense in upsetting them or her. Regardless to the risk of yourself? He amended sharply. Get to the cabin. You are drenched. Wintrow, you also. I have news to share with you. So he switches his annoyance to like, oh, I was annoyed because I was worried that you might catch a cold or something.
Right. Or like, it was dangerous of you to do that.
Yes.
Like, I wasn't sure it was safe yet. Not,
He needs
I don't
to keep
want
up
you.
appearances.
Yes. Which is a really interesting aspect to Kennit's character, that he really does feel that pressure of keeping his image up. And that does really influence his actions.
But when they're alone in his cabin and stripping off their wet gear, he can confront them a little bit more plainly without the crew there. He says, okay, so why are you here? He gave them almost time enough to gather their thoughts. Then, as Wintrow drew breath, he cut him off. Don't bother replying. I see it in your faces. After all we have been through, you still don't trust me. Kennit, Etta cried out in unfeigned dismay. He ignored it. So again, he like goes on this rant here and plays into exactly what Wintrow was feeling on board the ship and what Etta kind of dissuaded him out of. Basically
Right.
saying like, why don't you trust me? What about me that you find so doubtful? My judgment, my honor? I fear you are justified. I showed poor judgment in my promise to Wintrow and little honor to my crew in risking them and attempting to keep that promise. Your aunt is alive and aboard. In fact, she sleeps in your room. Stop, he ordered as Wintrow rose hastily. You cannot go to her just now. She was cold and battered from her time in the sea. She's taken Poppy to ease her. Not disturbing her rest is simple courtesy. Despite the hostility of our reception by the Paragon, I, at least, will hold to what a truce flag means. And then also warns Etta away from Althea and the 6 Duchies warrior who accompanied her. I fear a danger to your person from them. The Vestrit woman speaks fair words, but who knows what her true intentions are. So he implies something to Wintrow here, that he abides by a truce flag. So Wintrow's like, oh, they abided by the truce flag and then attacked?
Yeah, they flew the truce flag to trick you? Like,
Yeah, it's
what?
like- and then Kennit's like, oh, you were watching then. They provoked our serpents into attacking by firing arrows at them. They mistook the serpents' retreat for flight. Emboldened by that, they brought in their ship to challenge us directly. In the final battle, we prevailed. Unfortunately, a valuable prize was lost in the process. The ship was determined to perish. He thinks that was a vague enough telling that he could later shift details as needed, if Wintrow doubted any of it. Wintrow says, I had no idea. And Kennit cuts him off. Of course you didn't, because you have not learned a thing despite all my efforts to teach you. So he's really playing into their, like, you still don't trust me. You should. I'm the honorable one here.
Right.
They're the ones who messed up, and you still believe that I could have possibly messed up? Shame on you.
Well, you know what they say, a good offense is a better defense or whatever.
Yeah, best defense is a good offense.
Yeah, that's like sports. But he is really doing a good tactic here of catching them off guard and accusing them before they can accuse him. So that then they're the ones who have to justify themselves, and he has the upper hand again. And so he's really taking control of that. And
then makes them feel guilty because he says, I made costly promises to you.
yeah.
You know, I kept my word to you, but the crew has been risked and a rare prize has been lost because Etta begged me to keep your promise, Wintrow.
Right.
I fear it will bring neither of you joy.
Yeah. And it's annoying because we know it's a lie and they just believe him.
Yeah. And then again, like finishes off with more guilt tripping and saying, you'll probably ignore my orders as well about Althea because I'd like to keep her isolated. Knowing full well that Etta will be like, oh, of course you shouldn't. I'm so guilty of this, you know? Come on, Kennit. It's fine. We'll totally ignore her. Right, Wintrow?
But unfortunately, Wintrow doesn't really take a hint. He's like, I still want to talk to my aunt.
Yeah.
And Kennit mentions that he can tell that this took a lot of effort for him to say, and he's pretty proud of him for saying this despite the cost.
Yeah.
But Etta is not proud of him and is pissed. Like, how dare he do that?
But you will do as Kennit says, she told him. Wintrow bows his head. I am sure he has good reasons for wishing me to do this.
Yeah, so... And it's like, Etta is not allowing any disrespect to Kennit or his wishes after her man's is basically crying in front of them.
I do want to highlight this kind of small little section right at the beginning of the next paragraph, the last paragraph. It says, Etta's hands were kneading Kennit's neck and shoulders. He relaxed to her touch and let the last of his worries lift. It was done. Paragon was gone and Althea Vestrit was his. So... his point of view, he's like, okay, they believe my lies for now. Althea's going to be isolated. I can have everything that I wanted. Paragon's gone. My worries are gone. To Etta's point of view, he's like, I was worried about your safety. Why did you risk yourself coming over in the storm? Get down below. You guys don't believe me and doubt me. And I kept promises and you're upset with me. So she feels guilty. And then he's like, okay, it's fine. Like, you can stay on board. You don't have to go. Just obey me for now. And then she starts massaging him and she feels him like melt into her hands.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, he does care for me.
Yeah, he loves me. And no, he's just like, oh, thank God, a shoulder massage.
No, he's like, thank God they believe my lies.
Also that, but...
But from her point of view, it's just like, oh, he's so worried about me.
Right. And then he lets them know that they're going to Divvytown next.
Yeah. And this is where I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, he says there he would find a good excuse why Etta must be put ashore and remain there. He glanced at the morose Wintrow. With deep regret, he wondered if he would have to give up the boy as well. He would have to offer Bolt something by way of reconciliation. It might have to be Wintrow sent off to be a priest.
Yeah. And I think, again, we have this interaction with Wintrow, and I don't see any sexual desire in it. I'm not reading any.
This could be because he's already transferred those over to Althea.
Absolutely.
Right? To give complete, faith to the other side of this argument, I guess.
Right.
That there was some sexual attraction there. But I don't see anything either.
No, it feels more like the care you have for a kid, not like a romantic partner.
Care you have for a tool who happens to be a kid.
Somebody you care about in your own twisted way.
Yes. Yeah, that ends off that chapter. So lots of things happen, lots of interesting introspective things and peeks inside of Paragon as well.
Yeah.
That was a very, very interesting perspective that you get, especially as a rereader and especially as a first-time reader, honestly, because you get the full depth of what happened to Kennit. You get kind of everything that Paragon is. This is everything of who he is. He has all these, like, leading up to this, you could kind of piece together, he's a dragon too. Great. But now you know that there are two inside of him.
Right.
You could have pieced that together earlier. There was hints of it. Mm-hmm. But now you know for sure he has two dragons fighting for control, plus him, he wants to remain independent, plus Kennit's memories, plus all the other people who have died on his decks, which is a lot because he was a pirate ship.
Right.
And lost like 3 crews.
Yep. Yep.
So, yeah. Yeah, you kind of you get all of what Paragon is going through and why he is the way he is.
Right. Yeah, it's a lot.
That's kind of all you can say.
Yeah. It's good insight, I think.
It is.
This chapter has good insight, even though there's kind of that nastiness that happens in the middle, but it is still a good look into why some of the things that have been happening up until this point have happened and more of the motivations of Paragon and Kennit.
Right. Yes. Well, thank you for sticking all the way through that episode. There's going to be more of that discussion in the future. But again, we will let you know when that chapter is happening or what parts of those chapter, when that part is coming up.
Right.
So if you have thoughts on our conversations this episode, or you want to talk about other books or anything, please let us know. It is fitzhappy@gmail.com. You can find all of our links to our socials on our website, isfitzhappy.com. Or if you can't access that, because I know there's some timeout issues sometimes, I think we're at isfitzhappy.podbean.com. Well, so find out socials on those websites, or you can just go directly to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, YouTube, or Reddit, or is Fitz Happy on all of those. Thank you so much.
See you next week. All right, now we're going to talk about the things you brought to our attention.
But as is typical in this, I want to quick thank Barbara for tipping on Ko-fi. Really appreciate your support.
Yes, thank you. And now we'll talk about some things you guys said. Starting first with a Facebook comment from Christian. And this is from episode 226, which is chapter 21, part 2, the previous episode that we posted to this. And Christian is saying that they just caught up and read a really interesting theory regarding the Fool that is because of Paragon and Kennit.
Well, they came up with a theory.
Oh,
They didn't
yes,
read it.
sorry.
Yes.
It was a theory they came up with. My apologies.
Yeah, so the Fool, they think potentially that the Fool gives Fitz his memories back from Girl on a Dragon to prevent another Kennit from happening, because either one, he has been around Kennit or knows about Kennit now and wants to prevent that, or
Right.
two, sees something in the future of a Fitz without the memories and wants Fitz to have his memories in the future and like live a full life, or needs those memories to see the correct future in the head in the future, I guess.
Yes.
I said future way too many times there. But yeah, it's either gives Fitz back the memories because he wants to avoid another Kennit, or to give Fitz back the memories because he needs the memories to create the better future that the Fool has seen.
Yeah. And I want to say I love this idea. I think it's really interesting to think of how knowing that Kennit wasn't whole and is a horrible person is due to him losing parts of himself, and then having that be a reason why he would give Fitz back the parts that he put away. I think that's really interesting. I think also a little bit Fool wouldn't have even needed to meet Kennit for that, because I think Fool does comment on Fitz lacking something when they meet again. I could be wrong about that, but I feel like I have a memory of
maybe
the Fool noticing that something about Fitz is different.
I want to say that I don't think it's for something that the Fool has seen in the future, because I'm fairly certain that happens near the end of the last book of the Tawny Man trilogy. And the Fool does not see past that moment, because the Fool thinks that he's going to die.
Right.
And everything beyond the island is blacked out. So maybe see something right after he gets resuscitated or something, you know. It's like, oh, Fitz needs his memories back or something. But I think it's
right.
I think it would just be to give him his memories back, or to, because he noticed in Kennit, like, oh, that's a really bad idea.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, also considering Girl on a Dragon is there when they do it, I think it could just be, good timing of, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely he needs to have all parts of him back. He can't lose everything, I guess. So I don't know. I don't know what prompted it, but I do like the idea that Kennit had a hand in it.
I mean, I'm pretty sure they do make an exchange, right? Fool gives the rooster crown to Girl on a Dragon.
Yes.
And Girl on a Dragon gives the memories back.
I think so too, yeah. Yeah, so thank you, Christian, for that idea. Loved it.
Welcome to
the group.
well, welcome to the new episodes.
Yeah.
You've caught up.
Congrats.
Now you have to wait week to week. Well, now you have to wait another 2 weeks. Sorry.
Bad timing.
Yeah.
We also got a couple emails, which we want to talk about. First, we'll start with an email from Ellen. This is also about the same chapter. And Ellen is asking our thoughts on the British versus American edition.
Yeah.
So Ellen has the British edition from 2000, and it says Carrion, not the nameless white. And it's such a weird thing to change back to nameless for some editions. Overall, I find all the discrepancies between your editions weird. Did they try to make the Australian one shorter? How does this page count differ between your editions on this chapter and the whole book? So for chapter 21 specifically, I have 48 pages for chapter 21. Or sorry, 38 pages.
38 pages?
Yeah.
Okay. I would have to scroll back because, again, mine is an ebook compared to her physical copy. So I do not have, and mine is a very old reader here, so it's very slow. Let me see. My chapter ends on 436, and it starts on 405. So it is 31 pages, I think.
Mine is more pages.
Yeah.
Which also could be due to the fact that yours is digital and mine's not.
Yeah, mine's digital. I can change the font size.
Right.
I mean, it does have multiple pages if you scroll. How many total pages do you have in your book that are numbered at the end? I have 740.
903.
Yeah. So I think the ebook is just formatted differently.
Yeah.
And it's going to be very hard to compare between those two things. But my ebook is also, I believe I checked this last time, is the original printing from the United States. So this is how it was written. And I believe yours was translated. So
yeah, well, mine's edition 2015. So it's much later than it was originally published. Oh, I don't know why. It is so weird. It is. In this chapter, again, no changes made. I didn't find any differences from what was read to what I had in mind. So that's such a weird thing. I don't know why last chapter was so full of changes, but I don't know. But then Ellen also wanted to comment on how we were talking about how Paragon is usually sensitive and reacts badly when anyone tries to get him to do something, but not with Kennit. I had the hunch that there is a correlation there. What if he knows that Kennit makes him do bad things, but he can't react reasonably to that because of the blood and trauma bond? But because of that, he reacts all the more with every other coercion because he knows how bad they can get and maybe surmises that all coercion always leads to bad things. And I love this idea.
it's very interesting. I think maybe he could think rationally and be like, oh, what Kenneth's asking me to do is bad. But I don't know. I think it's maybe because it's the trauma bond, because he's family, because he's the only one who ever truly accepted him for who he was and loved him. I think his love just does overwhelm all logic in that case.
Okay.
I like that aspect of the story more than, the logical way that Ellen is explaining here. And I don't know.
I think it could be a little bit of both, right? So I think up until Kennit, Paragon was asked to do a lot of things he didn't want to do and wasn't treated very well. And then
right.
Kennit loved Paragon, and when he asked Paragon to do things, there was love behind it, and he was at one point kind.
Yeah.
And so it could be that recognizing that when people ask things of you, they don't have your best intentions at heart unless it's Kennit.
That's
because
true.
of the trauma bond that they have in the blood bond.
That's why he reacts really poorly to other people
Yeah.
trying to do it.
Because he's seen what other people do when they ask him things, Ygritte or even the other Ludlucks that were in charge of him.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know. I think it could be a little bit of both, but either way, I really like that idea that like it could be a reaction to knowing that what Kennit is asking is wrong, but not being able to do anything about it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I like
Thanks,
it.
Ellen.
Thank you, Ellen.
Last but not least, we also had an email from Barbara who wants to, say hi because I think this is the first time Barbara is writing in. So thank you very much for your thoughts here. They also mentioned that they started Rob and Hobb by reading the second book of the Soldier Son trilogy, just by random, in an airport bookstore. So not the greatest place to start, but fell in love with Rob and Hobb's writing.
Yeah.
Which is that's the first time I've heard that one actually.
Yeah.
So.
But I do love that.
Yeah.
That is funny how you can pick up a book and not realize and be like, oh, hey.
Yeah. Barbara's first language is not English. So mostly they've been able to follow along and likes to read books in English, but wanted to bring up that one of the words that I said a while back, retcon, was not on their radar and did not know how to Google it or figure it out until I said the full word in episode, I think they mentioned 185 of retroactive continuity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't even think about that really for our non-English speakers out there or ESL speakers. So
yeah, it's so interesting how when you speak your own language, you forget that like
portmanteaus
slang,
like that or slang is just kind of
slangs can sometimes be misunderstood or just not, I don't know, ever taught.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I don't know. It's so if anybody is listening and you don't speak English as your first language and we say something weird, feel free to write in. We will let you know what it means.
Yeah, seriously. Like, even if it's just a simple question of like, what did you say here? Like, we'll listen back and we'll either say, I don't know either, or
we've
we'll
made it up. No. No, but that is a really interesting thing to think about, that we definitely do use a lot of slang. So yeah, thanks for letting us know that we did that without thinking.
Barbara also attached 2 pictures. One, their hamster Molly, which
very cute.
Yeah. And 2, a picture of their Spotify rap. So thank you for listening so much to us. But the big topic of this email is Malta.
Yes. Barbara loves Malta. And this is a perspective.
All of Malta.
All of Malta.
All of her characterization. And
I actually have a new appreciation for Malta, thanks to Barbara, after reading their point of view, which I just hadn't thought about before. And I really like this reading. So Barbara says that they like Malta, flaws and all, because it just shows her strength of character and just who she is. And yes, she makes a lot of mistakes, but those mistakes help her grow into the woman that she is.
Yeah, basically that Malta is trying to test her limits, her possibilities of what she can do, and making those mistakes allows her to find kind of her full potential.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have that very strong guardian that is guiding her.
Yeah. And she steps up and she is her own guardian and she does figure things out on her own because nobody is helping her. And I really especially liked this line that Barbara wrote that says, outsiders and onlookers may not like that as it goes against what is expected and against norms and values. This goes especially for girls who we often expect to be sweet and obedient. And being sweet and obedient is absolutely fine, but not every girl is like that. And it does not make for CEOs, world leaders, and queens. And we need those too. So I thought that was a really interesting way to look at it. That like, yeah, she is horrible and does make really bad decisions, but ultimately she learns from those decisions and mistakes.
Another thing that Barbara does mention in here is that as we kind of touched on, the people who were supposed to look after her and raise her should have guided her. They didn't, and so Malta took up her own reins and made her own plans. Her goals were then childish and egocentric, but how can you expect something else from an ambitious young child that is left to her own devices by the adults in her life? Which, it's very interesting. Like, okay, you are writing an extremely positive note on Malta here. Yes, it's a great perspective to have. And yeah, that's a great perspective in general to carry into reading Malta. My point of view, still super spoiled, still super annoying to read. And yes, there's that appreciation too that you brought in, Barbara. That's great. But not every child given free reign would be like Malta, I will say.
No, not everyone.
Or even a small percentage, not close to them, would be like Malta. She was very spoiled by Kyle and resistant to other guidance.
Right. But I do think it does give me more of an appreciation for her and does remind me, like, obviously you can't go back and re-record those, but she is a child. She is making mistakes and she is learning. And she doesn't have a lot to go off of. She does only have those childish stories and thoughts, and she hasn't really experienced the real world. So of course her ideals of what would happen and what's going on is wrong and childish, but it does show the strength of her will and her ability to do what she wants and what she thinks is right, regardless of what's going on in her life.
Right. Yeah.
That is a good characteristic.
Yeah. It's kind of a clash between Keffria not wanting to see her baby grow up.
Right.
Right. And Malta being not old for her age, but seemingly ready to step into a more adult world or a young adult world, and Keffria just kind of like, no, you're a child.
I think it's that age. I think it's that in-between age where you are still a child, but you're starting to have more consciousness, I guess. I don't know, like the best way to phrase it.
No, it is. You become more aware of what's around you and outside of like your own interests and what you have in your life. You can kind of see what other people are doing.
Yeah. And I feel like it's such a weird age where, I mean, as adults looking back, you can tell you aren't an adult. But at the time, you do feel like more of a grown-up.
You're not a child. She wasn't like her brother.
Yeah, you're not.
She's not Selden.
Yeah, you're not still playing with dolls anymore. You've grown up. And it's like such a interesting transition period where it is hard to know what to do and how to treat somebody that age. I'm sure, especially from a parent. I wouldn't know. I'm not a parent, but.
And Keffria didn't know what to do with her and just kind of left her to her own devices.
Yeah. Well, because I know like for a lot of parents, it is hard when your child grows up, right? It is hard to see them grow and mature and age. You want them to be that little baby forever, and then they're not suddenly, and it's crazy. And so I get it. I get I get Keffria's resistance to letting her be a grown-up, but I think there definitely needed to have been more of a in-between, like give her a little bit of responsibility and not just say, no, you're a kid.
Yeah. And then she wasn't allowed to have that in-between stage, and Bingtown
really forced into.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you, Barbara, so much for writing in. It was good to hear from you. I love the Malta positivity. We don't really do a lot of that here, so thank you. And we did have one other email.
Oh, that's right. I said last but not least, but I forgot.
We have an email from Jonas, and this is about episode 216 when we're talking about the Wizardwood charm and their gender. So this is Kennit's Wizardwood charm. The conversation is about the charm that prevents. Oh, sorry, no.
Not Kennit's charm.
No, not Kennit's charm. The conversation is about the charm that prevents Edda from being with child. So the like Wizardwood skull navel ring.
Yeah, same one that Althea has.
Right. So Jonah says, I feel like either a part is so small it has no real big identity. I feel like the smaller, the less identity is there. Or we don't know gender. only male charms working to prevent pregnancy would be a 50-50, and something tells me these charms are always working.
Yeah, so we had a conversation of whether it was like, because if they had identities like a female dragon made into a charm, why would they prevent pregnancy if they want races to continue? That was kind of the conversation there.
Exactly.
So it's probably, I kind of agree with like, it's probably too small of a part to have identity, but something bigger than a walnut does. So
yeah,
it's really
like
hard
the
to
charm
tell.
did say it doesn't matter. It's you still have the soul of the dragon. So who knows? But then Jonas also said, what if the way it works is...
Because we were also talking about that. We didn't know like how it actually worked.
Yeah, so Jonas says, I always saw it as working to prevent pregnancy from being there and influencing Edda's egg, somehow rendering it neutral. But it could be even darker. What if she can get pregnant, but the charm absorbs the new life to thrive on? Probably not what Hobb had in mind.
But that's a very interesting thought, because it definitely could be.
Yeah, absolutely could be what happens. Because we know that the wizard would, or dragons in general, seek out those memories in a way. So it could be that. But we really don't know. So
yeah, we really don't know. But that's very interesting.
But yeah. So I don't know. I like the idea that it is just kind of a piece of wood, a magic piece of wood.
Thank you, Jonas.
Thanks, Jonas. Thank you, everyone who wrote in and who listens. We really appreciate you all. And we look forward to talking to you next time.
Yeah. Happy holidays. And we'll see you in a few weeks.
Yeah.
In the new year.
See you soon.